Hello, my name is Zach Sully, and my presentation is on social psychology, and I focus on the topic of attitude. Now, what is an attitude? An attitude refers to a set of emotions, beliefs, and behaviors toward a particular object, person, thing, or event. Now, attitudes are developed through your life, and they develop in your childhood or adulthood. Now, in your childhood, you kind of get your attitudes from observational learning and conditioning from your parents. For example, your parents condition you that smoking is bad or that you shouldn't do drugs. So your attitude towards drugs is you don't want to do it and you don't agree with them. Now, as an adult, it's kind of how you experience things. If you have a bad experience with something, you're gonna have a negative attitude towards it. And attitudes are mainly formed from experiences, which are easier to recall. Genetics can also influence attitudes as well. So you can blame your parents slightly for why you have a certain attitude towards stuff. Now, the behavior is pretty consistent to our attitude, but there's an exception, which is the AB problem or the attitude behavior problem. Now, it basically is stating that people don't always go with their conscious. There's multiple examples. People know smoking, drinking, and vaping are bad, yet they'll still do that, even though it causes liver disease, lung cancer, popcorn lung, and so on. Now, the factors determining behavior from attitudes go as follow: specificity, which is specific attitudes better predict specific behaviors. So if you have a certain attitude towards something, you're probably going to have a certain behavior that coincides with it. Next one is strength of attitudes, which is stronger attitudes towards something means a stronger predictor of behavior towards that than weaker attitudes. So if you feel super strong about being Republican or whatever, you're more likely to have a stronger behavior towards Republicans. Next one is vested interest. Now, vested interest is basically people that invest or participate in the outcome of the behavior are likely to act on the attitude on it. So what that means is if you put time and effort in and you really want the goal of a certain thing, you're more likely to behave a certain way to help support and bring that one to come to pass or come true. The last one is accessibility. Now, this basically means when the attitudes on a topic are brought to mind, you're most likely to act on it. And I'm gonna bring politics in for another example. If somebody is talking to you and they have an opposing view, you're most likely to start doing your view because they brought up your attitude on it because it's the opposite of what you think. Now, the elaboration likelihood model was created by Richard E. Petty and John Casipo in 1980. It's basically a view that persuasive messages are evaluated on the basis of central and peripheral cues. Now, central cues / routes are thoughtful consideration of arguments and evidence, which basically means you seem to think through all the evidence and all these arguments before you make a decision and a behavior. The peripheral cue / route associates objects with the positive or negative cues. So it's basically saying, like a cigarette, it leads to cancer and all of this. So you're most likely to not behave on that. Now, there's a fear appeal, which people believe that risks are bad enough, they will change your behavior to avert the risk. Meaning, if you think smoking is bad, you're more likely not to smoke and will avert that. Now, to continue the elaboration likelihood model, we have the selective avoidance and selective exposure. It's kind of what we choose to hear and say, and we really want to avoid what we disagree on. So on Twitter or Facebook, we may avoid political things that aren't of our party. For example, if you're a Republican, you're not going to look for Democratic things, and if you see that, you're going to ignore it, and that's selective avoidance. Now, the selective exposure basically means you pick what you want to see. You set your feed to show you messages you like. Like, if you're a Republican, you want to see Trump's speeches and whatever. If you are into science, then you're more likely to want to see more science stuff. This can really lead to you being misinformed and cause issues between you and people that have opposing views. Now, changing of attitudes. There's the cognitive dissonance theory, which people want the world and events to be consistent, so they will act on an event or issue to make it consistent again. Pretty straightforward. Now, attitude descriptive behavior is a behavior that isn't similar to an attitude that may affect him. If you usually enjoy science, if you're having a bad day, you probably won't enjoy science that day. Now, the last one is effort justification. People explain their behavior to themselves, even if it's unpleasant, to make it seem worthwhile. So it's like when you're studying for a test, you'll say, it's all worth it. I will get an A. And that's just to justify the suffering you went through for that. Now, moving on to prejudice and discrimination. Prejudice is disliking someone with no plausible cause or real knowledge. You just don't like them for no reason, even if you haven't met them. Now, discrimination is behavior that results from that prejudice, which means you going out and cursing at them or treating them like inferior beings. That is discrimination. Now, stereotyping is basically assumptions that all members of a group share the same traits or characteristics. So if somebody has a different view on something, you'll probably not like them. That makes perfect sense. Like, if I don't like how somebody smokes, I probably won't like them. Now, next one is social conflict. This is a social and economical conflict between people of different races and religions. It's kind of just saying, hey, you're in a different social class, you believe in a different religion, we have opposing views, so I'm not going to like you. That's kind of what I believe it is, and I don't think that's a really valid reason to be prejudiced towards people. Next one is social learning. And we've learned about this earlier, but to reiterate, it's basically that the children and people learn from their parents and others, and they will take their views and make it theirs. So if your parents were prejudiced towards a group, you're most likely to adopt that way and treat others that way because that's what you learn from observing them. The next one is informational processing, which is prejudices act as cognitive filters through which we view the social world. We are biased to our views on others. So it's kind of how we filter out things that we don't agree on. So we are biased to only our views and not what other people think of others. Now, the last one is social categorization, which is basically we isolate and stereotype those outside of our group. So it's kind of basically being like, this is my protective group, I'm not going to be friends with you. And we seem to not like those not in our group because they're different from us. Now, how to fight prejudice. This one is pretty straightforward, and I agree with all of these. The first thing you can do is you can meet with people outside of your groups, intertwine groups, connecting them with each other. Just go out of your way, take somebody, add them into your friend group, just out of the blue, and become friends with them, even if they have a different race, religion, or whatever. Now, you can also show examples of non-stereotyped and accomplishments of other groups. For example, you can take people that are black. Some people stereotype them as being dumber than others, but you can take some of their test scores and show that's not true. Now, one of these reasons is kind of controversial. You can target the discriminating behavior and try to stop it legally. Now, it's kind of harder to stop it legally, and that's why I say it's controversial, because some people won't change, even if it's against the law for them to not change that. So that's kind of hard to do, but you can still go in and fight it and try to help change the rules. You can also hold discussions about it to prevent it. Get a big TED Talk thing going to help prevent this. Also, examine your own beliefs and see if they're unreasonable. If you think somebody's inferior to you, you need to stop, think over, and start again. Your views might be wrong, and you can just go on and be friends with them and see that they're not that way. This is my Works Cited page. Thank you for listening and participating in my presentation.